Scotland's at the Euros, which means the Tartan Army will be able to see their team play at another international tournament. As one of the oldest national teams in world football, Scotland has boasted an extensive record against almost every nation that plays football. Let's take a quick look at the countries that Scotland has only ever played once at the time of recording this video. The Canadian Olympic team. Before things like the Nations League, the SFA always had annual summer tours for the national team to compete in international friendlies, such as in 1967 when Scotland travelled to North America to face the Canadian Olympic team, or Canada's under-23s to put it more simply. It was a comfortable win for the visitors in a 7-2 win, with 5 goals from Joe Harper, although there are still some conflicting reports about that, with another 2 goals from Bobby Hope and Willie Morgan. These tours weren't always considered full internationals, but in 2021 the SFA announced that players who participated in tour matches would be recognised as full international caps. The C.I.S. No, not the C.I.S. Cup, but the Commonwealth of Independent States, which was the team of nations still held together in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991. When both teams came together in their final Group 2 match of Euro 92, Scotland had already been eliminated from the tournament with defeats to the Netherlands and Germany, but the boys still put in a professional performance. Early goals from Paul McStay and Brian McClare were rounded off by a Gary Mack penalty 5 minutes from the end. At least you tried, boys. Ecuador. Scotland were invited to participate in Japan's Kirin Cup in the summer of 1995, alongside the hosts Japan and Ecuador. Their opening match against the Japanese ended in a 0-0 draw, but followed this up with a 2-1 win over Ecuador at the Toyama Stadium, with goals from John Robertson and Stevie Crawford. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any stills or videos of this match, so here's a lovely picture of Craig Levein instead. Egypt. Egypt would visit Pittodrie Stadium in Aberdeen in May 1990 as one of Scotland's 3 warm-up games before the 1990 World Cup. They would take the lead in the 15th minute through Gamal Abdelhamed, with Hossam Hassan adding a second 10 minutes later. Ali McCoist would pull one back in the 73rd minute, but Ismail Yusuf would add a third for the Egyptians 7 minutes from the end to round off a 3-1 win for the away side.
And Egypt have done it again.
Hong Kong League 11. The Hong Kong Unification Cup was held in 1997 to celebrate the unification of Hong Kong and China. A Hong Kong League 11 would compete alongside South Africa, Turkey and Scotland. Following their opening 2-0 loss to South Africa, Scotland would take on Hong Kong on the 23rd of May, with first half goals coming from Kevin Kyle and Stephen Thompson, followed by second half efforts by Christian Daly and Scott Gemmell to round off a comfortable 4-0 win. Iran. Scotland and Iran would meet in the second Group 4 match of the 1978 World Cup in Argentina. The Scots would take the lead just before half-time thanks to a frankly bizarre own goal from Iranian defender Andrik Eskandarian, but the Iranians would equalise in the 60th minute thanks to Irad Dainford, and the match ended in a 1-1 draw. This result was probably the lowest point of the 78 campaign for Scotland, who now needed a win over the Netherlands in the last group game to qualify, and we all know what happened there. Mexico. Remember back in 2018 when Scotland travelled to South America and practically all the first team regulars pulled out and they were forced to play with B team scraps? Well, this game against Mexico is the only time the two sides have actually met each other. Giovanni Dos Santos scored the only goal for the home side in what turned out to be a pretty one-sided game at the Azteca Stadium, as Mexico would round off their World Cup preparations with a win. Maybe reintroducing those summer tours isn't such a good idea after all. Morocco. Scotland and Morocco would face off in the final Group A match of the 1998 World Cup in France, with both sides looking to try and squeeze through to the knockout round, but as always seemed to be the case, fortune would not be on the Scots side. Saladin Basir would fire Morocco ahead in the 23rd minute. Abdel Ouaida would add to the misery just after half time, and if things couldn't get any worse, Craig Burley would see red in the 53rd minute, before Basir would grab his second of the match to round off a 3-0 win 5 minutes from the end, and that was the last time Scotland played at a World Cup. Paraguay. 1958 was Scotland's second appearance at the World Cup and were placed in Group 2 alongside France, Yugoslavia and Paraguay. They would meet Paraguay in their second match of the group. Paraguay would take the lead after just 4 minutes through Juan Aguero, but the Scots would equalise in the 24th minute thanks to John Moody. Paraguay would make it 2-1 just before half time thanks to Citano Rey, with Jose Parodi adding a third on 73 minutes, which was followed by another Scotland goal from Robert Collins just a minute later. Despite their efforts, Scotland couldn't find a leveller and would lose 3-2. Qatar. Qatar aren't exactly known for their illustrious football history. After all, they only had their first international match in 1970. But for whatever reason, FIFA decided they would make the perfect candidates for the 2022 World Cup, and following this announcement, the national team needed preparation time to compete at the tournament. They would visit Edinburgh in 2015 to take on Scotland at Easter Road, who would use the friendly to prepare for their upcoming Euro qualifier against the Republic of Ireland. In what turned out to be a pretty one-sided affair, Matt Ritchie grabbed the only goal of the match for a comfortable 1-0 win. Saudi Arabia. In February 1988, the Scots would travel to the King Fahd Stadium in Riyadh to take on Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would take the lead in the match, but a quick-fire double from Mo Johnson and John Collins put Scotland ahead just after half-time. But ultimately they were forced to settle for a draw. The match is probably most notable for being one of only 6 caps awarded to current Scotland coach Steve Clarke. South Korea. 1 week before they competed in Hong Kong, Scotland made the trip to Busan to face South Korea. It would be a fixture to forget for the visitors, with the Koreans taking a 3-0 lead thanks to Lee Chun-soo, Ah Yoon-hwan and Yoon Jun-hwan. Scott Dobie would grab a late consolation in the 74th minute, but An Jun-hwan grabbed his second of the match 3 minutes from time to cap off a 4-1 win for the hosts. Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad were also visitors to Easter Road in May 2004, as Scotland would run out 4-1 winners thanks to goals from Darren Fletcher, Gary Holt, Gary Caldwell and Nigel Cauchie. The match was significant for being the biggest victory for Scotland under the management of Bertie Volks, and for handing Craig Gordon his international debut at the age of 21. And lastly, Zaire. Who is Zaire? Well, we'll come to that in a second. Scotland would face them in their opening Group 2 match of the 1974 World Cup, a 2-0 win with first half goals from Peter Lorimer and Joe Jordan, in a match that boasted the talents of Sandy Jardine, Danny McGrain, Billy Bremner, Kenny Dalglish and Dennis Law. This opening result was followed by an impressive 0-0 draw with Brazil and a 1-1 draw with Yugoslavia, but despite being unbeaten, Scotland would miss out on progressing to the second round on goal difference. Zaire would eventually change their name to the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1997, and to date this remains their only appearance at the World Cup.